Okay, so this is my review of Your Honor, episode 3. As always, it's directed by Edward Berger, but this is the first episode where we change writer here with Allison McDonald taking over. I'm going to break this review up into 3 parts. I first want to tackle Michael and Adam's first half of their story. Then we'll go into Lee and Kofi's story, and we'll finish off with the Baxters, and then we'll come to where all the storylines come together, because this is the first episode, things get a little more complicated, and new developments are kind of showing at the same time and making this a little more interesting. So I was really worried here in this episode because I feel like this episode had the slowest 15 minutes of the series so far, and that was at the beginning here. They had this song playing by Leonard Cohen, Treaty. They even played it twice. The montage was too slow. Even the scene with Michael here getting rid of the gas station footage, it dragged on a bit. The whole first 15 minutes of this episode really could have been chopped up to get this going a little quicker. So an interesting development here is Adam now, his character, more and more is feeling prisoner of his own feelings of guilt and wanting to be set free of this secret he's holding. And we see that him bringing the truth is coming out in other ways, and right now he's doing it through photos he's taking because he believes these photos are a way he can kind of show what really happened. He's taking photos of his injury, he's taking photos of the crime scene, he's even taking photos of the prison, and we already saw how much he wants to feel what he believes he deserves, and you see that last episode when he's standing in place of Kofi in the courtroom, and now you see it here in the scene where he's in the elevator and he's telling the 2 other guys who are charged with misdemeanors that he was charged for murder. The angle I really liked here that they did with Michael's storyline and character is that he is trying to have his cake and eat it too. Meaning this episode really develops well that he wants his son to go free, not get caught for what he did, but he doesn't want anyone else taking the blame for it, and that's Kofi. So there is an ounce of humanity left in Michael, and that he's still trying to do the right thing for Kofi while clearing his son's name. So it complicates things even more. I think it would have been really boring if they just went with him full on committing to letting other people take the blame, but it makes it so much more interesting that he's trying to somehow do the right thing in all of the things he's messing up on. And that's why it made it so interesting having this Lee story develop now with Kofi, which we'll get into. But it's interesting that Charlie here flips out on Michael saying, now you're going to get me in trouble. I was helping out. I'm involved with this felony here. What is your problem for getting Lee involved? But it's almost like Michael takes from Charlie this little moment he says that, are you banging Lee? And that's the only way you're going to manage her, because he ends up kissing Lee a bit in this episode. He definitely was already into her, but I feel like he's going to escalate things because he knows he's going to have to keep an eye on her and make sure she's just following the path he set out for her. I also think it's hysterical when we go back to Adam's story that he is still developing photos in a dark room in 2020. And I get what they were doing artistically with him having a vision of him dancing and being free, but I'm going to act like that didn't happen because it just came off comical to me. I was laughing at seeing Hunter Doohan show off his dance moves here. I also think it's really strange that the character of Franny, who's his teacher that we know from episode 1 he's been sleeping with, that they cast her as someone who looks exactly the same age as Adam. It's a little puzzling and confusing because there's a subconscious part of me, and I think other viewers can relate, where you think she's like a co-student and it makes it look less scandalous as it being a teacher, which it should look. And it's also strange because there's a line here where Michael says to Franny, you know, when his mom died, you were there for him, you comforted him. I think that would have worked as an older figure. It's kind of just not giving the effect I feel like it needs by having someone who looks exactly the same age. But we'll see how it plays out. Now, 2 scenes that really stood out to me. The first one is I love all these tense scenes that we have as Detective Costello here, played by Amy Landecker. And she has another good one here at the dinner table with Adam and Michael. I think all fans of Breaking Bad and Bryan Cranston are going to love scenes where Michael has his back against the wall and has to talk his way out of it, just like Walter White always had to do. And you see Detective Costello is clearly suspicious of Michael and Adam. And that's what I'm loving about what this show is doing right now, is it's adding so many factions here that can mess everything up for Michael. There's so many layers and moving parts, and it makes it that more interesting in a story that I was worried could get bland because we already know what happened at the crime scene, but they're making it really intriguing in how many parties are involved and how many things can mess up our protagonist here in Michael and his plan. Now, my favorite scene of Bryan Cranston so far, acting-wise, and of Hunter Doohan here, is when Adam calls out Michael for acting and pretending like everything's normal and okay, and brings up that tomorrow is a funeral for the boy he killed. And I love, he's like, so we're just gonna pretend they're not burying him tomorrow. And Michael goes, yes, yes. That was Bryan Cranston at his best. He always hits the spot of fully invested in his character, genuine emotion, never overacting, and it just felt like that scary dad moment I think most people have experienced in their life at some point or another, or witnessed maybe one of their friends' dads freaking out like that. And that it's such an effective moment because we see how frantic Michael's character has been this whole show and hasn't even taken a minute to process really what he's doing, and that was like a moment for him to show that anger and fire he has just brewing coming out. Now I want to shift over to Kofi and Lee's story here. It's interesting because it's giving Kofi an option now to plead not guilty, and that Lee is going to spin this as police brutality to force the DA's hand here to just drop the case, which Michael wants for Kofi. The weird thing I do wonder though here, and again we're going to have to see how this develops, is what Michael's plan is now if he is protective of Kofi's life and him getting innocence. That how is he going to handle the Baxter faction of this? He's already having trouble with it in this episode, but if Kofi's let out of jail, it almost exposes him more to the Baxters. So I don't think any point of Kofi's going to leave this story. It's always going to be an obstacle for Michael trying to keep him alive and well, just like his son. He's almost now carrying the loads of two people. And that's where we're saying all these interesting things that make this even more messy is that the crooked cop who is in touch with the gang leader here for Kofi is getting worried now that he's pleading not guilty. And that makes you wonder now what's going to happen to Kofi's family, because that was not the deal Kofi made. He was supposed to say he's guilty. So again, just so many factions of interesting conflict here, which I'm really digging. And then shifting gears now to the Baxter storyline here, I love that we see Gina Baxter, played by Hope Davis, who does a great job this episode, really takes the spotlight now. And we get now brought into the story of Carlo Baxter, the brother who's in jail. Now, Gina has this brilliant plan. This is what she says in the episode is going to be their big move to just end this conflict, they think, with this gang, is that she's going to get her son to the funeral so she can have a moment to whisper to him and tell him to take care of Kofi. And we see Gina's this mastermind because she's bribing people here to even get him at this funeral. And she's got her head more on her shoulders in a plan of action where Jimmy Baxter is broken right now. And we even see him say a line here that he feels guilt for his son's death because he bought him that bike. But you see Gina here, just instead of being a sad mom, they've given her character now a motive and an eye in the ball here where Jimmy's kind of the one flustered. So where the storylines now that we've talked about so far all come together is really effective in one episode at this funeral scene. And everything ramps up now because now Michael's putting it together. His fear of already hearing Carlo Baxter might go to this funeral earlier in the episode, now he sees he's there, so he literally runs to make a phone call to get Kofi moved because he knows exactly what the Baxters are planning here. But remember, this gets messed up, his protection plan of moving Kofi, because he's talking to an unreliable cop on the other end who's more focused on the sports game. So we can assume that he didn't get Kofi moved in time. But that's why it's so important that Kofi's prison mate here, who's looking out for him, basically gives him really good advice that you're not going to beat the Baxters. You know, they're dangerous in every facet, but we can assume he's told Kofi to try to make some kind of deal and just go talk to him, Carlo Baxter, before he just whacks you. So that leads to the end of this episode where that's kind of a big choice in its own right, that Kofi's kind of just taking things in his own hands here. Now, what I didn't really like, though, was when we see Lee informs Michael that she's already gotten the charges dropped by the DA and her plan has worked to get Kofi free, and she says he's going to be free in the morning. That, to me, moved a little fast because that story was just developed in this episode, and for her to quickly get that DA convinced, I don't know, that felt like lightning speed to resolve the conflict. So be it, but I wasn't really crazy about that. It just felt off pace of the pace the show has been going in resolving its conflicts. So that's where maybe pacing issues could arise, where you have one solved really quick, but other things are seen kind of played out at a very slower pace. Just kind of make you feel a little bit out of reality, but again, not too crazy of a deal. So what is interesting, though, is in the development here of Adam's story where he tells Franny now, we knew this was coming, what really happened. So she's actually not the third party to know what really happened that day. She's really the fourth party. And the third other party which I didn't mention yet, but when Adam was taking photos at the crime scene, again, this mysterious black car that was tailing him the day of the accident sees he's doing this. So this car definitely really knows what went down here, or has a good idea of it by that day following him and then leaving the scene, then seeing him taking photos at the scene. We don't know who this is. So it's the fourth faction here, the mystery that's really kind of behind the show right now, which I really like to have that too. But what's so interesting about Franny knowing now is it's just going to be something that's going to piss Michael off that she knows. And it actually puts Franny at risk now to Michael. How far will Michael go to have to deal with someone like Franny if she gets in the way of his plan? And it might be the catalyst now that's pushing Adam to be truthful. We'll see. Again, I like the show is adding all these factions and things that can mess up Michael's plan, all these challenges, but they got to stick to landing. The more pieces you lay out here on the chessboard, it's going to make it harder to do that. But let's just have faith, because right now it's really interesting and it's working. So this was actually my favorite episode so far. I'm giving it a 9.1. I think that it did have the weakest 15 minutes of the show yet, like I said in the open, but it then had, I would argue, the best second half of any episode so far, and really exciting stuff. And it kind of showed you like, oh, okay, this is where we're going now. This is getting interesting. Gina Baxter's interesting. Kofi's story's interesting, and why Lee works in that story, and how Michael's trying to control all these things. And I, again, really think the best choice they made as writers here was that Michael was going to still have some of his old self in him and try to keep Kofi safe while trying to do the impossible and keep his son out of this without someone else taking the blame. That's what's so interesting, and I love they went that way. And again, Bryan Cranston and Hunter Doohan too here. That scene, again in the kitchen, where he confronts him about pretending about all this and then he snaps, was excellent, excellent stuff. So I'm really excited now. I'm really feeling this show and where it's going to go. I'm hooked now. I was intrigued the first two. Now I'm hooked. I want to see the next episode. I want to see where this is going. Let me know what you thought of it down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I read every comment and try to respond to as many as I can. Please make sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss one of my reviews of Your Honor. I'll be doing every episode. I also have reviews of Servant coming out soon. I do a bunch of TV shows, movie reviews as well. I also do celebrity interviews, so you're going to want to check those out. And if you like what I do here, I'd really appreciate a donation to my channel. It's $2 a month. There's a link down below. It really will help me be able to do this full time and make more videos for you guys. I'll be forever grateful. And please follow me at Steve Varley Show on Twitter and Instagram for more of me. And I'll see you next time.